Hi, I'm Greg Ullin with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today is an in-person conversation. Couldn't be more excited to welcome Bill Chidley, co-founder of ChangeUp, into the studio. Bill, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's going to be fun.
I agree. So, Bill, let's just set the groundwork. Tell me about ChangeUp, what you guys do. Obviously, you have major tie-ins to the automotive industry, so I guess I'll give you the stage to just talk about what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're a branding and retail design firm, and the core team of ChangeUp has been together since probably the late 80s, through even early 80s, through lots of different iterations, because we've been purchased and then spun out and then whatever, but it's the same DNA, the same core team. So we've been involved with the auto industry, designing the OEM on the OEM side, dealership facility programs. I mean, I kind of cut my teeth as a youngster with the Saturn program.
Oh, okay.
I was in the original Saturn Red team, helped GM launch that brand.
Wow.
We did, along with our CEO, as a retail experience. So have been kind of baked into the history of how dealership design has evolved through, pre-internet, all the way through early digital, and now, of course, digital first. So.
Right.
We work with Mazda with their Retail Evolution program, and this is our third iteration of the Mazda program with them. So that goes way back. We work with Kia. We did their previous program, and now we're partnering with them on what they call their Space Identity 2, which was driven primarily by their identity change. If you remember they've gone to
just a couple of years ago.
New identity, and they were flipping the system for continuity. Our longest client in the space, since Saturn isn't around anymore, is Honda.
Okay.
So we've worked with Honda since, the 80s again.
Yeah.
And we're now, we help them with, everyone will remember the Wave design. Yep. Okay, that had taken over the landscape for a generation, and finally we've now sunset that, and we're into what's called the Blue Stage, which is a whole new program for them. And of course they're attached at the hip brand Acura is part of that. We have a new program for Acura. Our latest client is Subaru, who we've started working with a year ago. So they launched their new dealership identity or retail facility program in September.
Yeah.
So it was a real sprint to get that one out, and that's called the Connection Hub. And so that's super exciting. And then we do work with some OEMs. We work with Penske. We actually just did the new Longo Toyota in LA.
That's great.
And occasionally a one-off. We just did the flagship concept for Kia in Los Angeles, in downtown, which was a cool multi-story. It's a real spectacle for your viewers who find themselves in LA. They can check that out.
Sure,
it's really a showpiece.
Very nice. So I've seen renderings at least of the new Subaru facilities. Do they have any open yet?
No, it's too fresh.
Yeah, so I've seen the renderings. It looks really interesting.
There are a lot of interest. We're dealing with individuals and dealers individually now to get it going.
Yeah. So what does that whole process look like? When you, I don't know. I think about it. I've never designed I take that back. Actually, I helped with some experiential design stuff, but. Just from a manufacturer, from a dealer who's making the investment, obviously you're centered on probably the customer experience, but there's requirements. So, what does that process look like? Is it a sit down and a brainstorm? Where does ChangeUp come in? How much collaboration is there? What's that dialogue look like? I just trying to wrap my head around how it all comes together.
Well, considering that we sit on the side of the table with the OEM,
right?
The brand plays, the idea of the brand plays a pivotal role.
So does the brand's like CMO kind of run the show? Like, where's the anchor, I guess?
Well, it's a bit scattered.
Okay.
Now you could make the argument that the CMO should be very highly involved. Mm-hmm. And they are. I mean, they're involved, but mostly tangentially.
Okay.
We get informed by the CMOs and by the brand teams and sometimes the advertising agencies. But the facility people are really the ones driving the bus.
Okay.
And, they're the ones who are responsible at the end for executing it. And in a lot of cases, they're the ones who are hearing the need from the dealers.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes from the ground up. Sometimes it comes from the top down. It depends on the brand. Mm-hmm. Some dealers feel like there needs to be some movement. Some feel like it's not welcome.
Sure.
It's a variety. But anyway, it starts with the brand, and you have to reconcile the need for the brand to do what brands need to do, and I can get into that in a second, and the function of the dealership. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we, over the years, have developed some good muscle in is understanding the dealer's business.
Yeah. Because
you can't just throw cosmetic, aesthetic solutions at a dealership.
Right.
A dealership, a retail facility it's a functioning organism. Mm-hmm. It has to be, and I guess the result of that is that you need to think of it like you're designing a kitchen, right? You need to know how you're making the dish. You need to know what you're cooking.
Yeah, well,
in order to design the kitchen.
Yeah, it's about process flow, right? So for a dealer, they have processes that have evolved over a long period of time. And
Absolutely.
They're really refined right now, and they know what they're doing, and they're very good at them. So, yeah, that's a good point. The kitchen's a good analogy where you have to have a physical space that supports that process to make it as efficient and effective as possible.
And you have fixed operations that you have to accommodate, right? Mm-hmm. Because from dealer location to dealer location, you've got different volumes, you've got different units in operation that you have to service. There's all kinds of math around that, but that's usually downstream. Usually when we start designing a dealership program, we'll take a hypothetical, right? Like here's a 1,000 average unit volume dealership with, in this kind of a market, so that we at least have a mule mm-hmm. to design to, and then we can vary from that. We can make it bigger, we can make it smaller. But the end goal that you want is you want a kitchen that works, right? But you want people to feel something. And that feeling is where you want them to feel things that make them trust the experience.
Yep.
You want to give them feelings that make them part of a tribe, because when you make selections, when you buy into a vehicle or a brand, you're basically electing to join a tribe. And so that we need the dealership to signal things that make people feel like it's desirable to be a Honda customer,
sure,
or to stay a Subaru customer, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there needs to be, it's an itch you want to scratch with the design, is that mm-hmm. sense of tribalism. And then the last is, it needs to play a theatrical role. It needs to be theater. And so you need to make sure that you're presenting the product, whether it's outside in the lot, but obviously critically in the dealership itself, inside in the showroom, or what we used to call showrooms. It needs to be exciting, and part of that is certainly lighting, like we have in here, to make us all look handsome, right? But it's also about making people project their identity into the future state of owning the car. So the stories you tell with the graphics and with the visuals around the car, and with Subaru, for instance, we're including a lot of propping.
Okay.
In the dealership, so you can think, the customer can see themselves with the Subaru as part of their life.
So are you saying
on a camping trip, right, or at a barbecue setup, or with their pet, loading their pet into the car, all things that are, part of that Subaru tribe.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's trust, tribalism, and theater. And trust, you can't. Am I talking too much?
No, you're good. You're good. I'm here to listen. I love it.
Because you wind me up and I'll keep going. But the trust part, trust is one of those wacky things where you can't claim it. You can't say, trust me. Trust is something that people conclude once all the other things are right. Like, are you trustworthy? And it comes from how we evaluate each other. Everyone sends off signals. Mm-hmm. How you dress, how you look, how you make eye contact. Your posture, they're all trust signals.
Yeah.
And so architecture, spaces, dealerships, they all can send off trust signals. And so we really get into like, what does that mean and how do you do that with the design?
So do you start, and maybe there's not one answer, but do you start inside or do you start outside? Is it what the dealership looks like from the road, or is it what the experience is like inside when you start? Like, where does the design process usually begin?
It usually starts with a plan.
Okay.
The layout of the dealership.
Okay, so like a floor plan.
A floor plan.
Okay.
Because an experience at a dealership unfolds. So you enter the lot, you park, you come onto the forecourt, you come inside. What do you want the first experience to be? What's the scale of the space? What are the signals we need to have? There was a point where there was a lot of, maybe 10, 15 years ago, where there were a lot of reception areas when we first walked in. Yeah. Those ended up being, for many dealers, kind of like underutilized, or didn't want to staff it, or there was some confusion on how to staff it, so it ended up being kind of a accessory and not really core. So those have kind of moved away. But you make decisions like that, right? You make decisions on how are you going to unfold the dealership experience. And because the ultimate form architecturally, the front, the shape, it's all driven by the plan. The plan's the skeleton that has to be made right first.
Sure. And that's really where fitting to the process comes into play, I assume, too, right? So you understand, you mentioned that you have at this point, a pretty good understanding of the dealership business. So knowing the sales process, right, in the front end of the store, or knowing the service process in the back end of the store, that's really going to inform your decisions on floor plan, and being able to then work with the manufacturer to say, hey, we should probably think about this. We should probably move this here. That's, I assume, kind of where everything starts.
Yeah, there's the macro and the micro.
Okay.
Automotive retail diverges from traditional retail in one key thing, and that is that the individual dealers make the decisions primarily on how the dealership is operated. Right? The OEM can't dictate, as you well know, what platforms to use, what processes work or don't work for them.
Sure.
So the end result dealership design for an OEM has to have hard points and soft points. Okay. So the hard points could be more experiential and more volumetric and more, the colors and the finishes and the furniture and where we might say put messages and things like that, and how we might light vehicles and maybe some theory around, well, do we want people to close in a closed office, or do we want them to be out on the floor in a more open space? And there can be some philosophical momentum or nudging on some of those things. But at the end of the day, when that dealer chooses to implement that program, it's going to be their service write-up idea.
Right.
It's going to be their sales approach.
Yeah.
It's going to be their idea of if they need a big common business development area or not.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of that hard and soft point management.
Okay. So what are the hard points where it's, these are I don't know what the number is, 5 or 10 or whatever the number is. These are the, let's call it 10. These are the 10 things that are going to be absolutely consistent at every Honda store in the U.S., right? And how are those determined? You mentioned a reception desk. Maybe that was one of them 20 years ago, right? Everybody's going to have a reception desk. When the customer walks in the door, it's going to be rounded in the front. It's going to have a white countertop and a blue and silver front, or whatever the color scheme was. Is that a good example, or like what are typically sort of those hard touch points where it's like, no, this is going to be a part of your store?
Mostly the things that have a lot of signal value to them. So if you think of how we remember things and how we identify things as humans, we remember logos, we remember colors, we remember shapes. Of course, what you associate with them is equally important. But what you recall and what you store is going to be highly visual. So you can go back to when car dealers or car OEMs had standardized sign programs, pylon signs, road signs, storefront graphics. Those were the old days where, that's the bare minimum. So you certainly need that, right? You certainly need to start there. The form factor, the color, the identity, and then the expression of that on the building. And it's kind of, we're going chicken and egg now, right? Because I talked about how the plan drives the outside, but you have to simultaneously solve for what the exterior is going to look like, because certain plan decisions might foster a more dramatic exterior execution than others.
Yeah.
If you're just going to build a box, that gives you a lot of opportunity to decorate the box, right? Yeah. But if you're creating an assortment of boxes that move together, that might be more interesting from the street, right? Because you can look at your building here. It's got a lot of interest. And I know people would have to go on Google search and look that up who are listening to this. But yeah, there's an interaction between the plan and the building.
Right.
So a hard point would be what your exterior expression is going to be, because that might have to work well in Dayton, Ohio, but it also has to work on maybe even an inline store in an urban environment.
Sure.
So there's going to be some things there that are like architecturally graphic. So that's a hard point.
Yeah.
Then once you get inside, it gets a little bit more into the envelope itself, the finishes.
Sure.
There could be, I know for instance, with Subaru, there are some very signature elements like community tables that project the idea that you're part of a tribe. We're not, come here and congregate, and they might host events or things on the weekend that could bring people in and actually have a reason to gather. So that could be a hard point.
Yeah. Now, do different manufacturers, in your experience, have different levels of sensitivity to the investment necessary by the franchisee, right? So, the dealership itself, obviously the owner of the dealership is going to invest a significant amount of money when they build a new building. You mentioned building a box versus building a bunch of boxes that fit together nicely, and it's always difficult to say what the shelf life on the visual identity is going to be. So if I'm investing tens of millions of dollars in a new building, and then, potentially 15 years from now, I'm going to have to invest another tens of millions of dollars to upgrade that building. And that may be a short time frame, but you understand my point. I guess to circle back to the question, are there differences across the manufacturers as far as their sensitivity to the investment necessary by their franchisees?
Not so much.
No?
I mean, some will incentivize it differently to soften some of that cost,
sure,
or to share in some of that cost. There are certain things that you need to respect. For instance, I talked about a building that was a box versus maybe several that kind of collide together. You have to realize we live in a world of buy-sells as well, and we live in a world where brands can switch.
That's true.
A Subaru dealer might take over a Suzuki facility that failed, right? So you don't want to have the Pizza Hut syndrome, right? Where you've got, that used to be a Pizza Hut, right, with that building roof line. So you need to make sure that you don't build something that isn't malleable, right? And I think one of the things we leaned in hard with the Honda Blue Stage concept that we have today is it's meant to have a lot of potential future dynamic. If you think about a stadium or an arena, sure, an arena can host a rock concert on one weekend and a hockey game the next, just by what it does and changes around. Well, if you take that mentality and you think that, maybe we would have had to do an EV thing, but now maybe we don't have to do an EV thing, so we didn't build this big temple to EVs. Now we can basically shake the Etch-a-Sketch and make it something else, right? And I have a personal philosophy with these dealership designs is that this is a little funky maybe, but you don't want to get a tattoo of something you can wear a T-shirt to communicate, right? And I think that's one of the things that happened with some of these older programs where it's like, oh, you've got to build this wall out of this really super expensive material or on the inside, or you need to have a waterfall, that's behind this this reception desk. Well, that's a tattoo.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're trying, and there's ways to get to pull on those same heartstrings with the customer without those capital intensive investments. We've got large digital screens now, and we've got all kinds of other things that, graphically and more temporarily can make those emotional connections without investing in trades.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that philosophy and that foresight. I think the arena is a good example because, yeah, you're right. I mean, it could be the same day. Even you've seen arenas flip over that you can kind of YouTube them and see those flips from basically, a hockey game to put the floor down and then and that then you have a.
This was the same place we were.
Right.
It's
in
crazy.
8 hours or whatever it is, it'll flip. But no, that's a great ideology. Just because you're right. And it's a double-edged sword because you mentioned Pizza Hut as an example, and that has its pros and its cons, right? Because you have in every building a billboard. That's a Pizza Hut, right? Or that's a fill-in-the-blank manufacturer dealership. But the investment that goes into a dealership is much more significant than a Pizza Hut, right? So that building and that resale value. They really need it to be versatile.
It's kind of a curse of capitalism.
Yeah.
Right, because I'm not an architect by trade. I'm a designer, but I'm by training, but I'm not an architect. But I know that ideally an architect would want the building to be an expression of where it is and take in the environment and be, all these wonderful things that we would love to see in a building that's built in as a city hall or something. But that's not the reality of dealerships, or we do a lot of fast food restaurants, we do a lot of other types of retail, and it's the same deal, right? You're not going to build a Burger King that if it goes south, that another brand couldn't come in and turn it into something else.
Yeah.
Because then you're painting yourself into a corner.
Sure. No, that's a great call out. All right, so I want to dive in a little bit to ChangeUp. You had put out a study on trying to, and it was a consumer study, right? So a consumer survey, but really trying to put a number on how important the in-person experience is, right? And we talk a lot. It's funny, we're sitting here in the end of 2025, going into 2026, and if you would have asked people 5 years ago, right? So we're in 2020. What's the car buying experience going to look like in 2025? And some significant portion of them would have said, well, it's going to be all online. Dealership won't even matter. Now, clearly, that hasn't manifested itself, right? And not even close. Right. And I really appreciated the numbers in your study because it showed, I felt, just how important that in-person experience is. Is the digital important? Absolutely, right? And does it start there? 100%. But it also carries over into the store, and the store matters significantly. So I had jotted down just a couple of stats. You probably know them off the top of your head.
Well, but the ones I don't, I wrote down.
Okay, there you go.
So we'll be good.
But no, when a couple of them that stood out to me. Well, first of all, I think this one's known, but 86% of people said the test drive influenced their decision to buy, right? So it's obviously sitting in the car, driving the car makes a difference when you're making a purchase like that. But things like 82% said the design of the dealership influenced their decision to buy. Mm-hmm. When you think that one stood out to me as wow, and you probably have some thoughts as to exactly why you've been doing this for a long time and have a lot of experience in different brands. So maybe you could dive into that as we could use that as a launching point into this study because that one stood out to me pretty significantly.
Well, I think there's a element of trust that gets broken or creates suspicion if there's a misalignment between the respect and maybe sophistication you have for a brand, to the degree that you might even bet your identity on it in some cases. Like I'm a X kind of person or I'm a Y kind of person.
Well, pause there because I think that's important to dig into. So you're betting your identity. So talk about that a little bit more. Obviously, when you're sitting behind the steering wheel of a vehicle, whatever it is, the badge of that vehicle is right on the front of it, right? Everybody driving down the road, everybody's standing on the street, sees you in that car. So can you maybe just dive a little deeper? We'll circle back to this, but I was hoping you could dive a little deeper into what you mean when you say that's your identity.
You're hitting on a very fundamental branding idea, which I get into in my book, which we'll bring up later. But people don't rationalize their decisions. You don't persuade people to buy things. You give them stories to tell after they've made a decision. Okay, so the stories that the motivations that they have to buy anything, these glasses, this, water, whatever, let alone a car, which is a very expensive and identity integrated decision. It projects, it's a suit of clothes that you put on.
Yeah.
Right? And so it projects something about you. Now, at the higher end of it, you've got the car as a symbol, right? You've got Mercedes and Porsche and to some degree Tesla, where they're showing that the signal is I've got excess resources, right? I'm potentially a great mate, or I project values that show that I'm a successful person. Mm-hmm. Then you've got people who might buy a Toyota or a Honda. And there might be some of that within their immediate family or whatever, but it's maybe more about I'm the kind of person who chooses these kinds of cars because these are my values. These are the ways I want it. This is how I want people to perceive me, okay? And it's a spell that a brand casts over their customer. And if you walk into or drive by a dealership that is incongruent with that image that has been crafted over such a long period of time and with so much cost and expense and personal investment, the spell can get broken. And the spell can get broken if the facility mismatches that whole identity structure that you've built up. Like, I wouldn't want someone to see me driving into this place with this kind of a car, right? That's I think what's below that statistic. I think it's not a surface level issue of there was a cockroach in the corner or something you can point to. It's an aggregate idea that it's a disconnect between this image I've created, this religion, right? It's this religion that I want to be part of, and the church doesn't look like it fits that religion at all. It looks like it's for a different religion, and suddenly I don't want to go. I'm going to try to find another church that believes the things I believe in the same way I believe in them.
So how do you balance that with the models inside of a brand? So let's just take Ford for an example, right? The buyer of a Ford Escape is not the same person as the buyer of an Expedition Max, right? They're in different maybe phases of life. They may have different values, and those models are almost brands in and of themselves, right? So they both have the Ford badge on the grill, but the model is different, right? And the buyer is different, and potentially what they're signaling with that purchase is different. So how do you balance that, where you have sort of the overarching manufacturer brand, the OEM brand, but then you have the models that are filling a kind of a niche category need for different sets of consumers?
The shift of what creates the spell gets diluted.
Okay.
Or it gets shifted from the space and the signals of the building to the interpersonal relationships.
Okay.
And what happens closer to the vehicles. I had the blessing of being able to design the Land Rover dealerships when they first came into the U.S.
Okay.
Because they had been part of the Range Rovers were sold in the corner of a BMW dealership for a couple years, and then they had the Discovery come out in the late 80s, mid-90s, whatever, mid-90s, I guess. And it actually gave them the opportunity to create a freestanding dealer network. Mm-hmm. As a designer, it was fabulous because you had so much texture you could dig into. We could make it look like a lodge, and we had the coordinates of the dealership on the floor in a Rosetta. We had all kinds of things that could signal this lifestyle.
Right.
Then Ford knocks on the door, and it's exactly what you're talking about. We've got a Mustang and we've got an F-150, and we've got a Bronco.
Yeah.
And those are singing from different songbooks.
Right.
Right. So the brand needs to, the facility itself can't do that heavy lifting anymore, because you can't play all those notes at the same time.
Right.
So you have to look for the overarching, what's the brand idea that holds all these things together, and you look for something that's more meta than just the individual products. And then you isolate those emotional things more proximic to those kinds of those particular cars.
Okay.
So you'd activate a performance vibe, and the consultant, the salesperson, would have to have a persona, or at least sometimes you can specialize if you get the volume to do it.
Sure.
But you have to adopt that mindset. And we all know that there's a lot of great people out there who know how to train for sales,
Right.
and can help close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very difficult for brands that are generalists,
Right.
to be able to do that. I mean, I remember I was an early buyer of the VW Touareg when it first came out.
Sure.
And it was a very expensive vehicle for a Volkswagen dealership.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a real cultural challenge for Volkswagen to be able to manage the young GTI buyer,
Yeah.
right, who's
Yeah.
coming in, the same service drive, right, and then you've got somebody who's basically traded into the brand from Audi or even Buick, or a brand where they just had a completely different dealership expectation.
Right.
That's challenging. It's very challenging, and I can't say that I have the answer. It's probably more at the operational level
Mm-hmm.
at that point than it is at the brand level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. And it probably ties back to your earlier thoughts around having the core elements, right? But being versatile enough that you can create different experiences even inside the same space. Now, if you have a brand like a Subaru that we were talking about earlier, that's generally speaking kind of the same audience, right? With the same core values, different vehicles. But yeah, when you're a Honda or a Kia, with where they're heading with some of their different model lineup, I mean, there's just things that have to take into account to make it more versatile, I suppose. That
Well,
makes a lot of
retailers
sense.
do it all the time. I mean, if you think about going into a department store, or a
Mm-hmm.
Target even,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a different vibe in this department than there is in that department. No, they're not a direct analogy. You go to a Target 100 times more frequently, and
Right.
for 100 times more things than you do a car dealership.
Right.
But you can create, through theater and merchandising, you can create those sub-stories.
Yeah.
The challenge with dealerships is that they don't have a dude who does that, right? Like anytime you introduce an operational complexity to a dealership, that's a problem, because nobody's assigned that job.
Right.
Nobody's assigned to make this display area over here feel like it's on a camping trip.
Yeah.
Right. That they want to sell the next customer who comes in and give them a good sales experience.
Right.
And if you take your eye off of that ball, someone else is going to do that.
Yeah.
So it's a real tricky thing, and that's why I think as much as dealers and the industry aspires to be retailers, they don't have that operational model that can do what retailers do.
Yeah. So that leads into something else I wanted to pick your brain on, around how dealers can have a brand alongside the manufacturer. One example that I think about, there's a customer of ours, great customer of ours outside of Detroit, and they sell more Corvettes than anybody else in the world. And they sell a lot of cars in general, but they sell the most Corvettes of any dealer in the world. And they have a digital presence, right, around being the number one Corvette dealer in the country. And they advertise it all over the place, not just locally. So I get a sense, at least in that one example, that to create sort of that brand, you can do it, and there's probably an opportunity to do it for those different model buyers, but it's a lot easier to do it digitally, pull them in, right? So kind of create and capture that demand, and then once they're in, then you can leverage the tools that you have to create an experience. But I give that example to maybe just use it as a starting point, a launching pad, to get your ideas on how can a dealer really create and have that brand for themselves and the name that comes before the manufacturer?
Well, the dealer, there needs to be a delineation between what the OEM brand does and what the dealer brand does.
Sure.
And the dealer can add tremendous value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it, the OEM can create demand, they can create the religion, right? And they can potentially drive curiosity and traffic and consideration and some of those things, but they can't deliver. They're still a step away from how people are treated.
Yeah.
They're a step away from the transparency of the transaction and the trust building that can happen. The hospitality, the community. So I think that's where the soft landing occurs.
Yeah.
It's a handoff. The question becomes, what's the long-term value of a dealer's brand? Like, it can have all those awesome signals in the moment, and then there's a relationship maybe during the warranty period. And we learned, by the way, in the research that is really critical.
Yeah.
That the service after the sale can actually enhance the dealer's brand reputation. Mm-hmm. We should know that intuitively, but the research backed that up. So the dealer's brand is very important in that trustworthiness in the moment of the sale and the immediate thereafter. It's the long in between that the dealer's brand becomes something that I don't know that it's been really strongly defined.
Okay.
Because because of the long purchase cycle and because a lot of customers migrate out of your brand as a dealer into third-party service and other things, or you might have a used car sale in the first place, that creating that continuity becomes something that can quickly become out of sight, out of mind.
Sure.
And so the dealer, like I think advertising, for instance, can do more than just drive urgency for dealers. And I'm not in the advertising business. I just know from the brand side of it that it's good to reinforce to customers that already bought your brand that they had made a good decision.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at a lot of advertising for insurance, for instance, that a lot of that advertising is to reinforce to customers that already have that insurance that it's a cool insurance to have, or it's the right insurance. It's that long in between. So I think the dealer reminding people that they are part of the community and that you can connect them to the great experience that you had when you bought there is kind of an under-leveraged aspect of the dealer relationship.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any elements from a design perspective, maybe some of those soft points that you referenced earlier, where the dealer has an opportunity to create that brand? I don't know. I think about that example I gave with the Corvettes, right? You know, maybe there's a section of the showroom or a section of the dealership that is, you know, they have 7 Corvettes lined up or 20 Corvettes lined up, and it's sort of the Corvette area. You mentioned having a camping setup, right, inside of the store, and that being somebody's responsibility. Are there soft touch points like that that are maybe under leveraged or not thought about? Anything else that you might call out?
Well, there's amenities at the facility that can be unique to you as a dealer, which a lot do already pretty well. I know, like McCluskey down in Cincinnati has I don't know whether it's a Starbucks, but he has he's got the volume.
Sure.
It's volume dependent. But, you know, so if you've got the volume and you've got the resources, things where you can add some of those additional touches that are beyond. I think looking for those ways that you can add value to the experience and then have it associated with you versus just, you know, so taking the right kind of credit for things so that the feelings that people have when they experience those things come back to you, because people remember things that make them feel good. Yeah. And they also remember things that don't. So, you know, if you don't get the core things right, then all the good things won't matter. Yeah. But assuming that those are right, that's when you can start building your brand on on some of these other things. But as far as the Corvette specific piece, that's an interesting one. I definitely think that within the boundaries of what they could get away with Chevrolet and in terms of brand standards and so forth, I think being able to insert a little bit of brand affiliation of the dealer with the increased selection or the mood that you could set in the dealership around them on the website, I think that's all valid territory for sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. All right. Well, Bill, I also want to get into your book. So, the Brand Vortex, fairly new. And you mentioned earlier, and this was it, I wrote it down because it struck me. You don't persuade someone to buy things, and there are people that would argue with you about that. So, I want to hear your perspective and your point of view. Certainly around the book, and maybe dive deeper on that point specifically.
Yeah. Thank you. So my career has been an interesting one. I started out as a designer, as I mentioned, and then I moved into brand strategy. And I'm a co-founder at ChangeUp, but my specific role is kind of practitioner and philosopher around brand strategy.
Okay.
So I get woven into these dealership projects now more as a kind of more of a mentor and a guide than an actual. I don't pick up pens anymore.
Yeah.
So, long story short, as I moved from trying to justify design based on vibes and how people might like it as from on its surface value,
right,
to brand strategy, working around like how do brands create connection, how do brands create value, economic value, how do we affiliate with brands? What's behind that? I learned more and more that it's psychological. It's heavily based in behavioral economics and neuroscience. So what the book does, without being too weighty and heavy and it's super approachable, is it gets into like just what happens when people pick brands. Like, why do they pick one brand over another?
Yeah.
Why do they build long-term relationships with brands? And how do they integrate them into their own identity? Because we're all running on the same software that our ancestors did 1,000 years ago. And what we do with brands and experiences, we hack into those ancient things, like the need to be the need to be part of a group and to signal that you're part of a group. How we build trust with brands. Brands have to have surface signals that attract you, but they also have to have deep signals that hold you in. And so that's what the book gets into. And yeah, there's some Subaru case in there a little bit that goes into some tribalism as kind of a call out, but it's not automotive specific. Mm-hmm. It's more broadly applicable to just how brands work.
Yeah, yeah. How much of that? And not to mince words, but how much of that is persuasion, right? Obviously, you're creating this draw, you're creating this gravity to bring people to you, and it's got to be the right person, right? And so I guess two-part question: when you think about creating a brand or amplifying a brand, you are trying to appeal to a certain person. So how much of that is persuasion? And then the second part of the question is probably more applicable, which is how far do you have to niche down for it to be relevant, right? Because I look at a brand like, I'll just use Nike as an example, right? Nike is a worldwide brand that appeals to anybody who's ever ran a 5K, right? Or taken on an athletic venture. But then you have other brands that are much more finite in their audience. And the question is, how defined do you need your audience to be, and how small of maybe a niche is too small? I don't know. It's something that's fascinating to me.
In the book, I go into 4 types of brands.
Okay.
There are simplifiers, there are directors, tribalists, and symbolists.
Okay.
And they're all cognitive theories as to what one your brand could possibly be in.
Okay.
And they're very elastic. I mean, there's some layering that you can do. Like, sure, you could be simple. Like, for instance, like DeWalt versus Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Right. You could argue that if I'm a a skilled laborer, and I'm a carpenter.
Yeah.
And why am I going to choose DeWalt over Milwaukee? Okay, well, is it going to be because of the torque? Is it going to be because of the battery life? Is it going to be because I like red versus I like yellow, or is it because I don't want to get? I want my identity to be that I'm a Milwaukee person when I walk onto the job site, because everybody on this job site respects people who have a Milwaukee, and I can be an outlier and have DeWalt, and I can say that I'm not playing that game, but it is a game.
Yeah.
And you did make a choice. So is that persuasion, or is that tribalism that's driving that decision?
Yeah.
There have been experiments where people's brains have had through an unfortunate event, have lost the ability to have emotion.
Okay.
They can't activate their feelings, and they can't make decisions. I could give you, here's all the information about stock A, and here's all the information about stock B, and you could never make a decision ever about which one to buy, because you can't deploy your feelings.
Wow.
Your feelings are the final, if not the primary arbiter of how you make decisions.
Yeah.
So you can, we've told ourselves forever that we're persuaded, that we rationalize decisions through persuasion, but it's just an illusion. We actually, and I'll fall on my sword for this, we actually post-rationalize our decisions with facts, with persuasion.
Yeah.
We lie to ourselves as to why we make choices, and we use those persuasive bullet points to justify ourselves after we actually made them. We might choose a Volvo because we think it's safe. Okay, but maybe it's because the people at my office or at the church or these people I affiliate with, it's signaling to them something about me, that safety is important to me, perhaps, but there's a bigger picture than that.
Right.
They're going to think I'm smarter, handsomer, better with my money. There's an underlying root to that decision that isn't about safety at surface value.
Yeah. Huh. That's pretty fascinating. I follow the logic, and I don't dispute it. No, that's really interesting. Well, Bill, that feels like a really good place to wrap. But before we do close up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should, or anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so. I feel like the well's dry at the moment.
No, well, I couldn't say thank you enough, Bill, for joining me. It was a fun conversation. I got a lot out of it. I hope everybody else did too.
I hope so too.
But thank you so much, and we'll have to do it again sometime, especially since you're close.
Yeah, and we could talk about other topics if you want.
Love to.
Cheeseburgers or pizza. Do a lot of that kind of work too.
All right, sounds great.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll do it next time. Well, I always love having somebody in the studio. It was great to sit down and talk with Bill Chidley, co-founder of ChangeUp, and I'm excited. He actually gave me a copy of his book, The Brand Vortex. Excited to get to read that. Check it out if you haven't yet. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcasts, and make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.